Think about the last time you left your front door unlocked, or the last time you let a stranger walk right into your kitchen while you were still upstairs in bed. It sounds crazy today, doesn't it? But in 1955, that was just Tuesday morning. Back then, the American neighborhood ran on a kind of iron trust that's hard to explain to anyone who wasn't there to see it. The centerpiece of that trust was a man in a crisp white uniform, driving a snub-nosed Divco truck. He was the milkman. He knew your name, he knew your kids, and he often had a key to your house. He'd walk inside, pull open the heavy door of your fridge, and swap out the empties for fresh, cold glass bottles with a thick layer of cream sitting right at the top. There was no paperwork, no digital receipts, just a note scrawled on a piece of paper or a mutual respect that seems to have vanished into thin air. We've traded that world for the convenience of the big box store and the faceless self-checkout line. But as the years go by, more and more of us are realizing that we didn't just lose the milkman, we lost a piece of the American soul. Today, we're going back to 1955 to find out what that life really felt like and why that clink of glass on the porch was the heartbeat of a better time. To really see the milkman in action, you have to look at his chariot, the iconic Divco truck. These weren't like the delivery vans we see today. They were built specifically for the American suburb. They had a snub nose, a low-pitched hum, and a feature that would probably be illegal today. You see, most milkmen drove those trucks standing up. Imagine it. There's no seat. The milkman is balanced in the open doorway, one hand on the steering wheel and his foot on a special standing brake, with the cool morning wind hitting his face. He'd glide down your street, hop out before the truck even came to a full stop, grab a wire rack of glass bottles, and be up your porch steps in a flash. It was a high-speed, graceful dance that he performed every single morning without fail. And he wasn't just there to drop off dairy, he was the eyes and ears of the neighborhood. In 1955, the relationship between a merchant and a family wasn't built on a digital contract. It was built on a handshake and a standing order. Most families didn't even have to tell him what they wanted. He knew that the Miller family on Oak Street needed 2 quarts of whole milk and a pint of heavy cream every Tuesday. He knew that the Johnson house had a new baby, so he'd leave a little something extra for the mother without being asked. But the most fascinating part of the Iron Trust was how he actually got the milk into your home. If you lived in a newer house back then, you likely had a milk box. It was a small, insulated metal door built right into the side of your house. The milkman would open it from the outside, slide in the fresh, cold bottles, and take away the empties you'd rinsed out the night before. It was the original contactless delivery, but with a human soul. And if you didn't have a milk box, the door was rarely locked anyway. It was completely normal for a mother to wake up, walk down to her kitchen, and find the fresh milk already sitting on the counter. Can you imagine that today? A world where a man could walk into your home while you were sleeping, not because he was a stranger, but because he was a guardian of your family's morning. He was a sentinel of the American suburb, and his arrival was the heartbeat that let the neighborhood know it was time to wake up. Now, if you think the milkman just dropped off bottles and left, you're missing the best part. Before smartphones and instant messaging, there was a secret language between the American housewife and the man on the route. It was a silent code that lived right there on your front porch. Every family had their own way of texting the milkman. If a mother needed an extra pound of butter for a Saturday bake, she didn't make a phone call. She'd leave a penny at the bottom of an empty glass bottle. If she wanted him to skip a day, she might leave the bottle upside down. Some families used a small color-coded wheel in the window. You'd turn the arrow to eggs or cottage cheese, and like magic, it would appear the next morning. It was a manual, analog system built entirely on a mutual understanding that just doesn't exist in our world of barcodes and tracking numbers. And then there was the prize at the top of the bottle. You see, Back in 1955, most milk wasn't homogenized yet. That's a fancy way of saying the cream hadn't been processed into the milk. So, while the bottle sat in that insulated box, a thick, golden layer of rich cream would naturally rise to the very top. If you were a kid back then, you remember the ritual of the cardboard pop. You'd use your thumb to press down on that thick paper seal, and you'd hear that satisfying thump. Then came the best part, the top milk. It was so thick, you almost had to scoop it out with a spoon. You'd pour that liquid gold over a bowl of oatmeal or a plate of sliced peaches, and it tasted like something from another planet. That glass bottle was a miracle of design. It didn't leach chemicals like plastic, and it didn't have that papery aftertaste of a carton. It was cold, it was heavy, and it was honest. When you held it in your hand, you weren't just holding a gallon of liquid. You were holding something that came from a local dairy just 5 miles away. It was fresh, it was pure, and it was part of a lifestyle where the quality of what you put in your body mattered more than how fast it could be shipped across the country. To really appreciate that cold glass of milk, you have to realize that the milkman's day started in a world the rest of us never saw. While the neighborhood was in its deepest sleep, he was at the local dairy by 3 in the morning, loading hundreds of pounds of glass and ice into a truck with no heater. In the dead of a Michigan or Pennsylvania winter, he was out there in the freezing dark, navigating snow-covered side streets before the plows had even cleared a path. But he was more than a delivery man. He was the sentinel of the suburbs. Because he was the only one awake, he was often the first person to notice when something was wrong. There are countless stories from the 1950s of milkmen spotting a fire in a basement window or noticing that an elderly neighbor's lights had been left on all night. He was a one-man neighborhood watch. If he saw a stray dog, he knew exactly which yard it belonged to. If he saw a bicycle left out in the rain, he'd wheel it under the porch. He had the entire map of the community's life memorized in his head. He didn't need a GPS. He knew every creaky porch step to avoid so he wouldn't wake the baby. He knew which families were struggling and might need an extra day to pay their bill. If a family went on vacation, they didn't log into an app to pause their service. They just left a handwritten note in an empty bottle. Gone to the lake for a week. See you next Monday. The milkman would then become a silent caretaker. He'd stack the mail out of sight or move a stray newspaper off the driveway so the house wouldn't look empty. He was a thread that tied the whole block together, a steady, reliable presence in a world that felt permanent. He represented the idea that your life and the food you fed your children was important enough to be handled with care by someone who actually knew your name. It was a physical, grueling job, but it was done with a level of quiet pride that we've almost entirely lost today. He wasn't just delivering units, he was serving his neighbors. And as he climbed back into his truck, just as the sun began to peek over the horizon, he knew that his arrival was the first sign that another day in the American dream was beginning. So, what happened? How did we go from a man in a white uniform bringing fresh glass bottles to our kitchen counter to standing in a fluorescent-lit grocery aisle reaching for a plastic jug that's been sitting in a warehouse for weeks? It wasn't one big explosion that changed things. It was a slow, quiet fade. As the 1960s rolled into the 70s, the world started moving faster, and convenience became the new American religion. Giant supermarkets began to pop up on every corner, promising everything in one place at a lower price. We started buying our milk where we bought our laundry soap and our light bulbs. We traded the heavy, honest glass bottle for the lightweight plastic carton because it was easier to carry and we could just toss it in the trash when we were done. But as those white Divco trucks slowly disappeared from our streets, we lost so much more than just a delivery service. We lost that iron trust we talked about earlier. We traded a neighborly relationship for a faceless transaction. We traded the cream top quality for a longer shelf life. and we traded that 5 a.m. clink of glass for a world where we don't even know the name of the person living 2 doors down, let alone the man who provides the food for our table. Today, we have more choices than ever. We have rows and rows of different types of milk that stay fresh on a shelf for months at a time. But ask yourself, is it really better? Or did we just settle for something that's easier for the corporations, but lonelier for us? There's a reason why when you see an old glass milk bottle at a flea market, you stop and pick it up. It's not just because it's a piece of history. It's because it's a physical reminder of a time when life felt a little more honest. A time when a man's word was his bond, and when looking out for your neighbor was just part of the job. Maybe we can't bring back the 5 a.m. milk route. Maybe that world is a ghost that's gone for good. But as we look back at those quiet mornings and those ice-cold glass bottles, we can at least remember what it felt like to be looked after. We can remember a time when the most important things in life weren't measured by how fast they arrived, but by how much heart went into delivering them. Because the milkman wasn't just bringing us dairy, he was bringing us a reminder that we were part of a community. And that, more than anything else, is what we miss the most.